Day had broken cold and gray, exceedingly cold, and when the man turned aside from the main Yukon trail and climbed the high earth bank, where a dim and light little traveled trail led eastward through the fat spruce timberland. It was a steep bank, and he paused for breath at the top, excusing the act to himself by looking at his watch. It was 9 o'clock. There was no sun nor hint of sun, though there was not a cloud in the sky. It was a clear day, and yet there seemed an intangible pall over the face of things, a subtle gloom that made the day dark, and that was due to the absence of sun. This fact did not worry the man. He was used to the lack of sun. It had been days since he had seen the sun, and he knew that a few more days must pass before the cheerful orb would just peep above the skyline and dip immediately from the view. This is the opening paragraph from the short story To Build a Fire by today's subject, Jack London. And welcome back to the library. And before we get lost amongst the stacks, I want to introduce my guest, reintroduce him. He is the conqueror of Plymouth Rock, the ward of Sir Patrick Stewart, the proctor of Posey, the only man to ever answer the call of the wild via AOL Instant Messenger, the wordsmith of West Woodstock, and the sorcerer of Sonic the Hedgehog, and most importantly, it's the Kindle King himself, Mr. Andrew Kenney. Welcome back, Andrew, to the library. How are you doing?
It's good. I enjoyed the Sonic add-on. Thank you.
It's
I am known for my blazing speed.
Rolling around at the speed of sound.
I'm dangerous down a hill.
Most people are, though.
That's very true.
Now, Sir Andrew Stewart is what I wrote next, which I don't think makes any sense. Do you have any questions or anything you want answered at this point when it comes down to the script, anything of that sort?
No, I glanced at it. I like being surprised sometimes, so I don't read it in too fine of detail. But I know we're getting to a pivotal point in the life of Senor London.
Yeah, and I think anybody who's got kind of like an understanding of who this guy is knows how we're going to end this, because I finalized the script for those. I didn't realize how many parts we're going to do this. It's going to end up being a 5-parter, even though this guy does not live a very long life. But every minute, Andrew, is nuts in the sense that, like, it's just like it's so crazy. So, Andrew, Jack has lived already a pretty wild, pardon the pun. We are probably getting to the point of his life that he's best known for. The last we left his story, Jack London's stepsister, Eliza London Shepherd, took out $1,000 mortgage against her house and used $500 of her own money to outfit her 60-plus-year-old husband and the 21-year-old Jack, her stepbrother. As Jack writes in his memoir, John Barleycorn, his sister, quote-unquote, grub-stalked him to go. I don't know what this means, but it's a type of slang I kind of want to bring back. So, okay. The brothers-in-law sailed on July 12th, 1897, and landed in Juneau, Alaska. The old shepherd almost immediately had to turn back as soon as he landed into Alaska. Part of this was because he was a 60-year-old man living in 1897 and suffered from crippling rheumatism. And cold climates is just not good for rheumatism, honestly. We don't use rheumatism anymore, but like that was a thing back in the day. It's partially also why we have snowbirds here in New England, right? Like I'm sure you're like familiar with snowbirds, but like it's just a thing.
Half my clients are snowbirds.
A lot of this ended up being just like how the native Alaskans and the native people of this area started to make a lot of money from carrying supplies into the Yukon, which is great, at least for them. The major stampede into the region really, like, ultimately was almost 100,000 people who joined the rush to, like, legitimately find enormous deposits of gold into Klondike and the Bonanza rivers. Bonanza is my favorite one. Someone who prospered from this gold rush, side alert right here, like, not from mining, but as a provider, was a German immigrant from the Kingdom of Bavaria by the name of Frederick Drumpf, which later would be named to Trump when he became a U.S. citizen almost immediately upon arrival in New York City. Yes, we are talking about 8647's grandfather, who set up, I believe, multiple combination hotel, restaurant, brothels along the same route that young Jack will take. I think it was multiple, but it is absolutely about the same route around the same time, which is just fucking nuts.
It's a little
This
weird.
money that Frederick will make him a very wealthy man and place the family into a real estate business to the detriment of billions later. I mean, Trump's older brother, who died of alcoholism, was named Fred Trump. So, like, it's
after,
this is
yeah.
the connection here.
God, I wonder how crazy his eyebrows must have been if his dad's during modern times were that crazy. He's just out in the Yukon with two antlers above his eyes.
I know, right? But we digress, right? Like, Jack immediately upon his arrival met Fred Thompson, Jim Goodman, and a man named Sloper, don't know his first name, who was just friends with him the entire gold mining career, who he would travel with in the Yukon route between Skagway, Alaska, and Whitehorse, Yukon, and then beyond that, the present day city of Dawson City, right? Then it was just called Dawson. Now, Juneau to Dawson is hundreds of miles away because, like, this on the map is just like, according to planet Earth, not close. The journey to where Dem Gold is in Dem Hills is going to be hellish. First, each man had to carry about 1,000 to 1,500 pounds of shit with them each way, like, legitimately, like, at least up the hill. This was because the Canadian government got sick and tired of people, specifically Americans, Canadians, and other immigrants, literally from all over the world coming to the Yukon to die. So, like, they made a law that said that they had to carry at least 1 year's supply of food. People were literally traveling from all over the world, dude. Like, people from Alaska came here to strike it rich, right? So it's not like just like Americans necessarily, but it's kind of nuts,
Yeah,
right?
just schlepping around in hopes for gold.
Yeah. In Juneau itself, like, since Jack was a sailor, he was assigned to purchase a boat to help get him and these men across something called the Chilkoot Pass. This was I mean, like, at least the boat travel was pretty simple to him because, of course, it was. He was actually an accomplished sailor at this point. Crossing the pass itself, the Chilkoot Pass, would be very difficult. Each man was responsible for carrying his half a ton of shit, basically straight up a rocky terrain. It was at least 3,500 feet of increase of elevation within a short amount of time. It took the crew legitimately 90 days and many trips to get all their shit all across it. I'll add now that this was like part of the world where it is winter 9 months out of the year. Jack's shoulders were constantly raw and bleeding throughout this time. You can, like, imagine thousands of men died on this trail, which is actually what happened. Not only from, like, exhaustion, but from disease and general exposure. Also, avalanches, which happened only a couple of weeks after Jack left there, and, like, almost 100 people died from that land avalanche. So, like, we're talking a really dangerous route, and Jack thrived.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's like he had so many shit jobs before this and, like, lack of sleep and, like, tough conditions that he's like, this is just another Tuesday for me.
serious. It's just another 90 days of Tuesdays for him, dude.
Yeah,
Like, it's
exactly.
the next part of the journey. They got to something called Lake Linderman, and they chopped down trees to effectively make shift boats with sails and cut from the canvas that they had to carry all their shit, right? So they made makeshift boats. Getting across the lake was simple enough. Things got a little bit hairier when they reached the White Horse Rapids. There, the small crew witnessed that all the other travelers refused to go down these rapids, literally taking the boats out of the water to carry them out. Jack walked up the river, sized it up, and figured, he'd just give it a shot, saying, "I'm built different than these hundreds who drowned when their boats crashed amongst the rocks." Now I'm going to quote his main source here that we're using, Jack London, Sailor on Horseback by Irving Stone. Quote, "Jack took a long look at the White Horse Rapids, came down and said, 'Nothing to it. The other boats tried to fight the current to keep off the rocks. We'll go down as long as it'll clear us.' While the crowds of men lined up and cheered, Jack nailed his canvas sails over the provisions, stationed Sloper on his knees in the prow of the battle, and Thompson and Goodman in the center with instructions to give him plenty of speed, and sat himself in the stern to steer. By following the main force of the water, they shot the rapids safely, tied up the calm water, and walked back for the second boat. Instantly, Jack was divulged with offers to take other boats through. He took on one other boat because he had become friends with the husband and wife, but he refused to charge them anything," unquote. Yeah, seriously. But what took excruciating labor for everybody else took Jack London only a few minutes of navigating. That's genuinely what he was good at. He was just very, very good at navigating through any kind of rapids, any kind of he was just a survivalist at a young age.
It's like anything with movement. He's like, "Oh, I gotta get on this train, dodge this thing, avoid this guy, sail this down." It's just seems to be just fueled by adrenaline.
Yeah, and I mean, again, he's 21 years old too.
Right.
What a legitimately crazy time to be a 21-year-old.
Yeah. I had trouble forgetting to remember to set an alarm when I was 21.
Even with their navigational advantages, they missed their small window. Winter came and they had to spend the winter in an abandoned cabin at the mouth of the Stewart River, where a ton of people would come and go. Realistically, this would later be referred as the Stewart camp itself, but there was 50 to 70 people who was living there at a certain point. In this camp, Jack would meet many of the people who immortalized the short stories and the novels about the Yukon that he wrote. Now, again, quoting Irving Stone, "To this cabin came Burning Daylight, Louis Savard, Peacock, Koff, Brewer, Stevens, Del Shepard, and Malumet Kid, who would be one of the most frequently recurring characters in the short stories and tales." His real name was Emil Jensen. Jack thrived in this survival landscape. Sub 30-degree Fahrenheit frequently at the nights did not bother him. His experiences as a hobo and sailor helped him make just friends with any kind of person. And he became something what we know as a man's man, right? Apparently affable and a generous young man as well. I don't know. I kind of get how that works, but a man's man, you'll see also in later episodes, that kind of makes sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listeners probably know this, but Jack London would also never find gold. The most he would find was a form of fool's gold while panning his charmed lifestyle. However, even while he was in the Klondike, he was telling people he was never going to find riches. He was there basically to gather stories and write about the Yukon and Alaska. He took notes nightly in his diary and had a knack of getting old timers, which were called sourdoughs, which is hilarious because my wife is currently making sourdough bread. I don't know, bringing it back to just normal people's talk, to tell details in long yards that he could just jot down. which he did even if the events if in the stories were like completely unfeasible. He eventually gave up mining and went to Dawson, which is in the Yukon, where he described it as a muddy tent city with 50,000 miners. Dawson City like still exists to this day, right? And can largely be like thanked for its existence due to its gold rush era. Also, this being the gold rush, sex work was probably the most lucrative work. And the Royal Mounted Canadian Police, seeing that they potentially had a problem with the inrush of women amongst these haggard, sexless men, many of whom violent and drunk, separated the sex workers into a separate camp across the river. They called this place Louse City, which is the singular for lice. Of course, the men didn't have any difficulty or any trouble crossing the rickety rope bridge that was built to visit said singular louse, right? I also want to shoehorn this in here now, besides the constant danger of the elements and unpredictable weather, drunken, violent men, vicious dogs, and or wolves, presumably vicious moose, right, and horrible diseases. This part of the world was also known for some of the biggest swarms of mosquitoes that would literally bite through the thick woolen clothing that the men had to wear all year round. And the few days in the summer where it was above freezing that would swarm in drones did not protect them from these fucking mosquitoes.
But god damn it, they're gonna cross that bridge and get a different bug biting them.
You know what? Jack, we'll talk about this now. Jack would hardly work in Dawson, right? This is because he didn't need to spend money to travel to earn his keep. Instead, people at saloons paid for his drinks, as he was, very good company. He listened to them and was able to tell a really good story about himself and everything around him. He was a favorite with the ladies for the same reason, and even though he didn't have money, Irving Stone states, quote, he had his fun, unquote. It's important to note the entire time he's in the Yukon, Jack is also preaching socialism. Like we're just like talking about this, but this is what he does for the rest of his life. It was a popular topic of conversation, not just by him, but by most of the men. He also shared the few books brought by him to like just anybody he wanted to. Notably, the only books that he had was Das Kapital Meiner Marx, On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, and Paradise Lost by John Milton. All of this considerably light reading. Jack also met a pair of brothers named Lewis and Marshall Bond. And one day, while traveling to their claim, he met the brothers' St. Bernard Scotch Collie mix, which was also named Jack. This Jack would be the inspiration for Buck in this most famous work, The Call of the Wild. Well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, right?
Yes, and I knew where you were going at, because if I love one thing, well, love many things, but I do love a good mutt. And I always thought that was cool about the book, that it wasn't like your typical, well, we'll get to it, but it wasn't just a husky.
Well, I mean, it's great that it isn't, because like of course it isn't. Great, I have a mutt. I have a purebred mutt, right? This is the way I would joke it. Yeah. She's wonderful.
100%, yeah, AKC certified mutt.
100% her. Oh, good for you, Flora. Due to the lack of diverse foods, however, Jack caught scurvy. This would be the first of a laundry list of absolutely horrible diseases he would catch during his adventures. He recovered in the Catholic Missionary Hospital. His time in the Yukon was pretty much done after this. He and a few men built a boat out of a handful of trees and sailed down the Bering Seas. The 1,900-mile journey took 19 days, and even though Jack was partially crippled from scurvy, right, he steered flawlessly throughout the entire journey because he was just that good. Like he couldn't feel his right leg, if I remember correctly. Jack would write his memoir, John Barleycorn, quote, "It will be understood that I brought nothing back from the Klondike but my scurvy," unquote.
Get that man some citrus.
Jack returned penniless. He
Jesus.
ended up being one of the most profitable people out of the Yukon Gold Rush, but this is like decades and years ahead. When Jack returned home, he discovered that his stepfather, John London, had died while he was away. By all accounts, Jack admired his stepfather, right? He was clearly devastated, and now at 22, he was the head of the household. His mother, Flora, ever the complicating factor, has also decided to adopt her grandson, Jack's nephew from her stepsister, Ida. It's not the same one that who sent her from Alaska, right?
Yeah.
Different, yeah. Jack now felt obligated to provide for everybody in the family.
That I feel like the word now is a little bit of a stretch, because there's definitely been at times where a lot of his funds and time and energy and all that stuff seemingly went to, you know, his family or his mother's exploits. So that's kind of interesting.
You're right. And one of the things I missed here is this story called The Apostate. And like it's a great story about just a kid who had to work all his life, who decides to never work again. And like it's probably the best anti-work short story like bit of fiction I've ever read. And it's just like, fuck off, I'm done.
The Office Space director would definitely read that.
Great stuff. So this is
Little side note before we get too far. Did I ever tell you I went panning for gold?
Did you?
Yeah, in Alaska, I got enough to buy what the guy said would be the equivalent of a Big Mac. This was in 2005, so inflation notwithstanding. Uh, so yeah, and I didn't get scurvy. So
Well, I hope that's because you just butt chugged limes.
just boofing citrus, you know?
Just boofing it. There were, I mean, again, side note, there was a point where like everybody forgot about scurvy, and like we forgot that like scurvy is prevented by like vitamin C. So like there was like a point of sailors that like we got scurvy, and then we forgot it for like 1,000 years why we would get it. It's
I
just
feel like I feel like scurvy is the nautical smallpox.
I mean, it's pretty close to it. Yeah, like that's a great comparison.
You get it
I
from
don't
a
know,
sail,
dude.
not a
Like,
blanket.
just bring some fucking fruit.
All right, so
Well,
he's back penniless. What's new?
quoting Jack about coming home, quote, "The situation was desperate, never intended to redeem it." Quote, Jack wanted to be a writer, right? But he also knew he had to like work immediately. However, the West Coast still hadn't rebounded from the last depression, right? That we talked about in previous episodes. Jack could not find a sustainable job, even though he was near peak physicality. He's like 22. Like he is literally like the best worker you can have. He did not. He did what any handsome man at 22 who was chewed up by his diet of raw potatoes for sustenance and defeated by scurvy otherwise would do. He tried to become a model. He failed. I know, right? He also found out that like the U.S. Postal Service was accepting applicants, and apparently back then you had to like take a test to become a postal position. I think you have to do at this point, but like back then it was pretty rigorous, and I don't think it's like something like you could joke at today, but like you know, like you had to take a big one, and then he passed them, but no positions were available at that point. Jack had learned that many publications would pay something close to $10, which is like per $10 per 1,000 words for short stories back then. $10 per word is about $400 per word today. So he decided to take a shot and began his writing career. Months then progressed. There were no responses from the magazines nor any of the newspapers he reached out to. Jack began pawning everything he owned, which is like a cycle that he would do in his like early years. Like, we'll talk about this. And as the summers turned into winters, the family starved and grew cold. Finally, he got word from a magazine called Overland Monthly that they wanted to publish a short story called, quote, "To the Man on the Trail," unquote. And he was thrilled. Literally almost any money would help the family pay off any of their debts. Now, we're going to quote Irving Stone again as he receives a letter from Overland Monthly, because Irving Stone's a great writer, and I'm 100% in with this like kind of conception. Quote, "There was no check. There was only a note from the editor saying that he found the story available and would pay $5 for it upon a publication. $5 for a manuscript that had taken 5 days to write. The same old dollar a day he had earned as a laborer in the cannery, the jute mill, the electric plant. No man could subsist on that rate alone, let alone the family. Even if he wrote great manuscripts and sold everything that came from his thick, scrawling pencil, there was no hope for him. Only the rich could afford to be writers," unquote. And that's what he thought, right? Now, that dejection didn't last long. Jack received a letter that same afternoon, that came from a publication called The Black Cat. Jack had forgotten he sent this like thing out back before he left, during his time in Berkeley College. But he earned $40 from this, which is about $1,600 in today's money. Like, for one thing, that's a lot of money. Like, I can't imagine like sending something out and just earning $1,600, right?
Yeah.
That's 2 months rent for them. Again, more than a grocery bill. The pawnbroker got paid off, and still he had money left over.
Hell yeah.
When we talk about money in the next couple episodes, which we will talk about a few times over, like, it's going to end up being crazy how much money he's actually making in like comparison to what it actually is worth today. The publication spurt didn't last long. He invested the last of his money spurt basically on stamps, so he was able to like send other work to Eastern papers, Eastern being like Boston and New York, but all he received were standard rejection letters. Personally, I understand, Jacko. The Postal Service sent Jack a notice that he would be able to like have this opening that paid $65 a month for the rest of his life at the minimum, and then an increase. This was like a really good job. He confided to his mother, Flora, who had not been a great mother to him, and not one whom like I would like actually ask for like some advice, right? Like, we've talked about Flora in the past.
Yeah, that's
She's not
stuff. Yeah.
Jack wanted to be a man of like letters, just not like that. He asked Flora what he should do. Flora, in what might have been a defining decision in her life and his life and everybody's life afterwards, encouraged her son to write books and stories instead of taking this position. So Jack went to the library and studied both philosophy and sciences that were contemporary. These were things like Marx, Darwin, and Nietzsche. For better or for worse, these influenced his writing and his personal beliefs. He was an atheist, after all, at this point, which not common for somebody in the 1900s. Quote, "I believe that with my death, I am just as much obliterated as the last mosquito you and I smashed," unquote. He also studied the literature that was being published and like found lots of modern writers submitting works with no realism, no color, no subtlety, just like crafted work that was not exciting. So he studied how other writers wrote and developed his own voice. Now quoting Irving Stone about his journey about how to learn how to write. Quote, "To Jack, one of the greatest things in the world was words. Beautiful words, musical words, strong and sharp and incisive words. He read the heavy and learned tomes, always with a dictionary at hand, wrote down words on sheets of paper and stuck the sheets into cracks between the wood and mirror of his bureau where he could memorize them while he shaved and dressed. He strung lists of them on a clothesline with clothespins so that every time he looked up or across the room, he could see the new words and their meanings. He carried lists of them in his pocket, read them while he walked to the library, mumbled them as he sat over his food and prepared his sleep.
This was like me cramming for a vocab quiz in 7th grade.
Seriously. I mean, seriously, yeah.
Sanguine, 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 sanguine.
The Overland Monthly finally published his short story in January 1899. The editor not only forgot to send a copy of the magazine to Jack, they also didn't send the $5 that they owed him. Jack was so broke he had to borrow a dime to purchase a copy to read his own story. Still, when the Overland asked for another story to be published the following month, Jack sent them The White Silence, promising $7.50 this time, which was enough money to feed the entire family for at least a month back then. They were living off of potatoes and beans, basically. The magazine was just like not good to him for a long time. So Jack borrowed a nickel for a ferry fare to get to the offices of the Overland Monthly. He found out that the paper was in very poor financial trouble. And though the two editors praised his writing, they would not be able to send him a check for $5 they owed him for at least another day. Quote, only the threat of physical violence from the starved author brought forth the $5 in small change from the pockets of the two literary gentlemen, unquote. I'm Jack on this one. Agreed to publish another story with the Overland in April, which officially began the Alaska Yukon series with his work and would ultimately publish about 12 stories with him. In May, he began to blow up with 4 different publications, including a poem. And then in June, he saw his work in wealthier Eastern and East Coast papers generally. He officially became a professional writer in about 9 months' time, which is nuts. His work was unique. It showed brutal realities of hard living and sacrifices in the tundra. By the end of the year, and right before the turn of the century, his big break came. The Atlantic Money sent him a letter stating that they wanted to publish a short story, An Odyssey of the North, for their January 1900 edition. They were willing to pay $1,000 to this day. It would clear out all his debts. The publishing company heavily associated with the Atlantic at this point called Houghton Mifflin, which I had to write a side note for this because I did some research. The craziest story about this publisher, back in 2015, they couldn't find a charity that would accept royalties for them publishing, and I'm not joking, Mein Kampf, which is nuts to publish in any fucking circumstance. Second off, like, why are you profiting off of this? Third off, what? Why are you publishing this? Like, it was just nuts. They were relatively new and wanted to collect the short stories and publish his first book. They signed a contract for December 21st, 1899. And this Boston-based newspaper and publishing company now started a trend with Jack London and other things that were the California-Alaska frontier literature revolution. Like, this was huge. This was massive back in the day. Any questions so far? Like, I just dumped.
No, it makes sense because, like, back then, it's like these were the ways that people not from that part of the world would, like, hear stories. So, of course, it would be exciting for someone, like, on the East Coast to hear about it. Like, nowadays, you can just Google the weather, where the weather is in Alaska, and, like, probably see, like, drone cameras and like video footage and stuff. Like, this might have been the first time that people were like hearing about, you know, the Yukon or like Alaskan, you know, night all year during parts of the year, you know, night all day during parts of the year. Like, so that makes sense for the people that aren't from that area.
Well, 100%. Like, basically 18 months of his life ended up being like 18 years of his publication, like, stories, right? Like, it's just very much, you know, you're a movie guy, right? Like, the amount of time that Westerns were made and popular far exceeds the actual era of
Right.
where
Oh yeah.
Westerns were based on, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And like
That's a
this kind of, yeah,
good point.
kind of same point. Yeah. His biographer says that the reason why like it was really, really popular at the time was like he was breaking conventional norms. He was talking about things like socialism, which was huge at the point. He was talking about things like atheism. He was talking about women's legs, which was controversial. I don't know. He was like really just like a forefront in the short story capacity in a world that like the short story was actually declining, which is kind of nuts to think of. And like he began to a new short story revolution. The money Jack made from all these stories didn't last long, though. As we said, it was only the equivalent of like $5,000 as of recording, and Jack would live a perpetually self-inflicted debt-filled life, right? Most of the money ended up going to Flora, who is not known for her financial prudence, Flora being his mother, right?
Yep.
The family fell back right into poverty within a month. Since writing is a feast and famine situation, especially early on, Jack didn't publish anything that following month afterwards. His view on money would forever be odd and controversial and also contradictory to his socialist beliefs. But let's quote Jack on this. Quote, "It's money I want, or rather, the things money will buy, and I can never possibly have too much. As to living on practically nothing, I propose to do as little of that as I possibly can. The habit of getting money will never become one of my vices, but the habit of spending money, God, I shall always be its victim. If cash comes with fame, come fame. If cash comes without fame, then come cash." Unquote.
That's a pretty great quote.
It will become very prophetic for him. Jack's only 23 at this point, and he decided to reach out to like his biological father via mail. Early letters were ignored, but at this point, Professor Cheney, the astrologer, responded by saying, "I was never married to Flora Wellman, but she lived with me from June 11th, 1874 to June 3rd, 1875. I was impotent at the time, the result of hardship, privation, and too much brain work. Therefore, I cannot be your father, nor am I sure who your father is," unquote. None of those reasons are why you would become impotent, but you know, he lost out because very soon his son's going to be very fucking famous.
Yeah.
Like, like one of the most famous people of his time. Jack, being a young man in his 20s, was doing his best to find a partner. Before he went to the Yukon, he met a young woman named Mabel Applegarth through like the Henry Clay Debating Society we mentioned earlier
Hmm.
last episode. All the time he was fast forwarding through his high school and brief stint in college, she was part of his life. She couldn't be more different than Jack. She was described as a sickly woman, not in the way that Jack was, like through just like constant like being indoors, and was dominated by her mother, whereas like Jack was objectively a strong person when he isn't dying of easily preventable diseases. You know, he could just sucked on some limes realistically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like his relationship with his mother, though complex, was not, you know, in the same way as what like Mabel's was. She did not dictate Jack's life. She came from wealth and higher rank in society. Jack was impoverished from the very get-go. 2 points first here. Jack like had to travel basically everywhere he was going, and he biked everywhere, which is a fun image of him like just like traveling on a mongoose across town, like 2000 suburban kid, like he wasn't just starving. And second, that like Mabel's father passed away recently, but like Jack would often travel from Oakland, California to San Jose where she was. That's like a fucking long trip. It like that is not next to each other. That bay is massive. And go back the same day. Surprisingly, Mabel's overbearing mother consented to the proposal of marriage one day, which she only recently changed her mind, but he can only have like her hand if Jack agreed to support her as well. Now, This wasn't just a mother-in-law cliche saying that wouldn't work out for him. He just couldn't afford to do it. Back in the day, you had to support everybody that you were if you were like the only sole income, right?
Right.
And he couldn't afford the family that he just basically came back to after being poor this entire time. Financially, it was irresponsible. The 40-mile bike ride from Oakland to San Jose to see Mabel over the weekend also became, honestly, exhausting. In February of 1900, Jack didn't see much in publishing, though he worked very, very hard every single day. Jack's writing solidified, and his habits really became something that would be legendary. Jack boasted that he would write 1,000 words a day, 6, sometimes 7 days a week, no matter where or what he was doing. If this didn't get to the 1,000 words he wanted to, he would make up for the next day. This type of writing habit is productive and honestly a grind. Depending on like how productive it is, and this is like out of personal, this would be somewhere between like an hour to 8 hours. But Jack was known to work 12 to 16-hour binges too. 1,000 words, depending on your mentality that day, it could be nothing. It could be a shit ton. But
Right.
like imagine every single day. Getting back to the storyline, February 1900 ended up being a pivotal moment for Jack's life. Even though he didn't publish anything, it began with an old college buddy dying of poisoned canned meat. His friend had enlisted in the military at the outbreak of the Spanish-American War. Listen to the Archie Butts episode for our hot takes on that war, right? It always comes back to the Archie Butt website.
Always comes back to the butt. Yep.
It turned out that war profiteers didn't care about the amount of meat they sold that was inedible, even if it was rotting. However, this can of what I presume to be infested with botulism would be very important. Before we get to why, the editor of Overland Monthly, a woman named Nanetta, wanted to have an interview with Jack London, right? During the interview, the niece of the editor was also present. Her name was Charmian Kittredge. The two would become fast friends, and we would talk more about Charmian later on, but she's incredibly important.
A fan of her toilet paper.
It's not Charmin, but yes, okay. Jack would also become good friends with Bessie after the two grieved over the death of Bessie's first love, his friend who died of bad fucking canned meat. Bessie quickly became a Jack's editor for his work, admiring his ability. Now, I'm going to quote his biography, but do you want to guess what goes on here next?
I think a triangle of sorts.
Yeah, well, later on, we'll talk about that. Quote, Jack and Bessie were honest with each other. They did not profess to be passionately enamored in the romantic tradition. They knew that Bessie would still love Fred Jacobs, his friend, and that Jack still loved Mabel, but both had their hearts set on marriage. They liked and respected and enjoyed each other and felt they could build a good marriage and a solid home and raise children. They agreed that although love was one of the smallest words in the language, it was sufficiently elastic to admit of many definitions that Mabel considered a proposal for a day or two, and then she accepted.
Oh, yeah.
It was a pure marriage out of convenience.
Yes.
We'll learn why that wasn't the greatest thing, but we're going to have to move on from here. Bessie was interested in her. She was interesting girl, right? She would bike around as he would to get from one place to place. She was a tutor herself. He can confessed the legitimacy of his own name to Bessie, being that he wasn't Jack London and she didn't care. He had to actually go to a judge in Oakland where they decided that it's okay that his name is Jack London due to the fact that you've been living on this entire time. It was easier to change your names back in the day, right? Jack's writing career continued to blossom. An East Coast publication with the reputation of selecting unknown authors and paying them very high wages for their work called McClure's published one of his short stories with an added note saying they wanted all his work and will pay handsomely for it, right? It was $300 for 3 stories. It's the most money that he ever possessed at the time in his life at that point. Jack's short story collection afterwards was called Son of the Wolf. He loves wolves. We'll get more on that. It was also published soon after with huge critical success. He was being considered the American Rudyard Kipling almost immediately, which is nuts. It's like being compared to Stephen King, except Kipling was British and knighted, but also had a second home.
And his thing was
right?
tigers.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, money started pouring in as soon as that happened. Like, he sold so well because of the stories they were just so modern. They dealt with science that was like controversial, contemporary, specifically evolution, that was taken for granted. And like, dude, I've been to like some fucking theme parks where like humans were living with dinosaurs, dude. It's just a thing. He approached McClure's with like monetary concerns basically from the get-go, though, and McClure's graciously provided him $100 a month for 5 months in order for him to start writing a novel, and those advances were made possible. They knew that they had a golden goose and they needed to protect it, right? Now, even before Jack's riches came pouring in, he loved hosting people. This was an eclectic mix of hobos from the road, seamen from his razzle-dazzle days, university graduates he knew from that brief stint in college, and prospective writers and other intellects. You would like be able to like come to a Jack London house any time in his life for conversation and booze aplenty. This time was on a Wednesday evening. Jack loved hosting. He was a very social dude, and he would just like have the time to say anything and like give out money. More on that a lot later, but he was just like, I mean, frivolous is a word. Someone who wasn't so thrilled at this point was Flora, who like felt like she was being replaced right when Jack was making it. She felt she needed her due because she was the mother of a very, very important son, which Jack wasn't the type to just disregard his mother, honestly. When Bessie told Jack she was pregnant, Jack was ecstatic. Flora, not so much. I don't know if it was like just because like I'm not a fan of Flora London based off her vanity, but it got to the point where Jack had to rent a small cottage near the house to put Flora in and like his nephew to reduce the stress in the household, and it didn't work out. All it did was add massive spending and more stress. He spent more than came in as he lent money to her, which is a theme for him for the rest of his life. And he paid all of his mother's debts and whatever harebrained get rich quick scheme she conjured up, which isn't necessarily a theme, but we'll get to there. He also paid Jenny Prentice's debts, the African American woman that helped raise him, like listen to previous episode when her mortgage and taxes were late. Jack was like literally always just giving out money. Jack's still making good money though, even though like the McClures decided not to publish his first novel, he was still provided $125 a month salary from the McClures, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's nice to see that he's getting a little bit of success here, and then he definitely seems to kind of contradict himself between like what he writes and how he lives though and supports others, which I mean, I guess it's a good thing. He's trying to help people out, but I think it's maybe to his detriment, it seems.
Uh, Dude,
You know,
this man, we'll talk about it. He makes so much money that he never ever owns. Like, it's nuts to a point where like it's baffling. He started writing like socialist papers, and he quotes himself early on, quote, "I must be the only writer making money off of socialism," unquote, which is
at least he's
probably
aware.
it's probably true. Bessie and Jack had a girl. Her name was Joan. Shortly afterwards, Jenny Prentice moved in to help Joan. Still, Jack found time to speak at socialist rallies. When the Socialist Party of Oakland decided to run a candidate for mayor, they chose the 25-year-old Jack London, who got, guess how many votes? It's just a wild guess.
I'm trying to think what would be if it would be a big number or a small number. I don't know. Let's go 50.
245. It's still a small number. He would run again 5 years' time when he's much more famous, and we'll get there. and he would get 4 times the amount of votes. It's nowhere near as much as you would expect.
Yeah.
Jack began to lose favor with McClure's when they rejected a number of his works that he wrote, of which was picked up elsewhere, right? He was still selling shit. They also asked him to return like back to the writing of the North and other things because he started writing socialist shit. So he would eventually do this, but he would also find a new source of steady income. Jack knew that he had to like take care of a growing family and a spendthrift mother. So like when he found that like his debt was objectively making what surmounted to be a middle class income at this point, this would be a pattern for Jack. He would just spend and make more and more and more and spend, write, more. He also grew sedentary of his lifestyle as being a writer. So when the American press called for somebody to cover the Second Boer War in South Africa, Jack jumped on the opportunity, leaving a pregnant wife behind. He got his ass across the country and then on a boat to England, where he was supposed to interview British generals about the Transvaal. Now, we mentioned the Second Boer War again during the Archibald Butt episode, but the Second Boer War was between the British Empire and largely the white inhabitants there, almost all the Dutch descendants of South Africa, called the Boers. For our purposes, and this is like very much minimizing it, guys, it tying to this episode, one of the inciting factors was the Witwatersrand gold rush and the war that actually established the city of Johannesburg, which is now the largest city of South Africa, and made famous for the spaceship that appeared and took camp over the city. And then South African government had to relocate the extraterrestrials to a labor camp called District 9, which now bears the question, Andrew, is prawn really a derogatory term? Sorry, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. The allegories are amazing. Now, waxing philosophical here, Jack lands in London, and the British generals either didn't want to have any time with him or did not care for this American writer, right? Like, Jack had also spent all his money either getting to South Africa beforehand or like probably drinking. And so he really couldn't get to like where he needed to go, which was the Transvaal. Jack decided to take on a different self-assignment, and that was to live in the East End of London, which is historically the working class and home of the Cockney accent. That accent, and none of us can say in the United States. Though
Take
I am
that
not
guy,
entirely...
Richie.
Can you do a Cockney accent? I'm like,
God, no.
Okay.
I feel like it's like one of those things that you can say like one or two words in, but if you tried to say like a sentence, you'd be like just sounding like a horse's ass.
It's all like just swear words too, right? Like it's just that's all it is.
It's literally just like to this day, Snatch is one of the only movies that I need subtitles on, and they speak English. And yes, I know like the gypsy scenes have them, but it's just like
the romantic scenes, like holy crap. I've seen multiple accounts saying that like it's Brad Pitt, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it is Brad Pitt. He's in the movie that like it's both the best accent in the world, possibly, and the worst.
Yeah,
like his conveyance, like oh yeah, the Snatch is awesome.
yeah.
I tried to
Listen,
watch
if
the
Dick
other.
Van Dyke couldn't do it in one of the most famous movies ever, I don't think we stand a chance.
No, still. During Jack's lifetime, the Cockney accent definitely existed.
Indeed.
It was this place was in rough shape, dude. Like he bought himself the local attire. He wrote that just one of the most harrowing descriptions of poverty to ever exist. This description and this book also influenced somebody who we would know called George Orwell, who wrote a lot of famous things, and he wrote based off of the people of this, something called Down and Out in London and Paris, and it influenced him heavily. Jack returned home and effectively made a deal with his new publisher, Macmillan, to get $150 a month of salary. That's like a $10,000 a month salary today.
That's crazy.
Like that's pretty good, right? Macmillan would also get first dibs on any book they was publishing. Bessie also had their second child, another daughter, and Jack didn't hide his disappointment. He really wanted a son. It's like both shitty and sympathetic thing, honestly, but like man can be quite complex and hold many onions. But like, I guess I mean layers, and I'm getting my Shrek references messed up. Jack spent his time shortly after the birth of his second daughter constructing a new story. This one was about the dog he knew in Yukon, also known Jack. Jack would change the name to Buck and spend only 30 days writing this book, dude. This book would be called The Call of the Wild.
All the words hanging in the mirror. It just made sense.
It's a great title. It's a objectively great title. He was offered $750 to publish this book by the Saturday Evening Post, 28 grand today. And then Macmillan's offered him an additional 2 grand, 70K, to publish it in a book form. So first serialized and then in a book form, as well as push all the books for him for the rest of his life in lieu of any royalty payments. This was a shitload of money for his 30 days of work, right? So he took the deal. This would probably be the best decision Macmillan's would ever make financially. And still, it was probably the best decision Jack made. Now, I'm going to quote the biography here. Quote, "The book was having what the publishers termed a runaway sale, but the publisher didn't send Jack any honorarium. This does not appear to have been stinginess on the publisher's part, for he was liberal with his star author over a period of exacting years. He felt that Jack had made a bargain and that if he sent him an honorarium, he would be breaking the agreement and setting a precedent. If Jack had kept his rights to The Call of the Wild, the royalties during the next few years would have earned him close to $100,000. Assuming that the publisher could have invested as much money in promotion under these changed conditions, Jack never regretted his bargain. The publisher had spent a fortune in advertising his name, and he knew the worth of his advertising to his future career." Unquote. That $100,000 at that point would be $3.75 million adjusted to inflation, and Jack almost certainly made that much money for the next couple of decades easily. Right?
There you go.
So, yeah.
Rags to riches, baby.
That's exactly what this is. This is like beyond rags to riches. Everyone listening to this podcast probably knows, or at least have heard The Call of the Wild, and if you haven't, you probably have grown with the most restrictive household in the world and lived under the deepest rocks, and I'm not over-exaggerating that. Its global impact is unbelievable. The first 10,000 copies sold right away. As of 2023, over 7 million copies are sold. And with the publication and the sale of Jack London's most famous works, we're concluding today's episode. So, on to part 4, and trust me, things get LOL pretty wild.
Woohoo!
I know, right? So we got to The Call of the Wild, right? Like we quoted one of the best short stories he ever did on the first part of this episode, right? Which is To Build a Fire, which happened not short after this.
My dad's favorite short story.
It's one of the greatest short stories ever. I love that short story, dude.
And you know who took a lot of inspiration from it? I don't even know. I feel like I saw this / just can like realize it is the Revenant, the movie.
Totally, 100%. Yeah, I mean, the amount of inspiration that Jack London has spread throughout all of literature and popular art is unbelievable. Like he's just touched everything, and we're going to touch a little bit upon it from here on end.
It's funny, not even on purpose. Just the book series that I'm happen to be reading right now on the old Kindle app is this guy. He was an Alaskan U.S. Marshal and retired and created kind of like essentially like the boy version of like action novel, you know, like just like airport read books, but it's all in Alaska, and he constantly is mentioning Jack London, like. He like make mention of his books being on like character shelves and stuff like that. So it was just kind of like funny timing.
I mean, and rightly so. Like this guy was everywhere. I had a hard time condensing things. Like he lived a short life, but a pretty unbelievable one. we just talked about like one of his works, and we're going to talk about other ones in the next couple of episodes in the series. But dude, it's just it's unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
it's a
A lot
true
of trees in
American.
that forest.
Yeah, right. All right. So, like, simply put, I'm just going to say, like, if you have questions or anything you want to add, Lost in the Library podcast at Gmail, or follow us on Instagram. And the sources are Jack London, Sailor on Horseback by Irving Stone, and then his memoirs and his works.